Welcome to the Crystal Coach Show with me, your host, Anahata, helping you live every day with clarity, guidance, and practical wisdom. Are you feeling overwhelmed, anxious, maybe disconnected? Do you ever feel like you don't know how to live a life of peace and joy? I am Anahata Roach, the Crystal Coach, and during this show, we channel divine wisdom through stories of service, spirituality, and stones for self-care. The Crystal Coach Show leaves you with a feeling of connection and the clarity it takes towards becoming the best version of yourself as you hear from thought leaders and many others to help you ignite the crystalline nature of who you really are. Stay tuned. The Crystal Coach Show starts now. Hi there, and welcome to the Crystal Coach Show. I'm your host, Anahata Roach, and I am delighted to have as a guest today a friend that I have just met, and I'm just so excited she can be here. Ursula Sexton, yay! She's a nationally recognized educator. Her illustrious career is as a caring and inspiring educator and researcher, touched thousands of lives, from children in preschool and their parents to professors of international universities seeking her expertise in pedagogical models, leadership, and bilingual science education. She has taught all K through 12 grades in a career that spanned over 30 years. Now retired, she dedicates her time to continue honing her skills as a human development practitioner. Her vision is to address family needs and individual challenges to help those in their journey of deepening commitment toward awareness, belonging, and connection with their own loving essence. As a teacher, researcher, author, and consultant, Ursula has impacted all levels of the educational system. She brings to her new role expertise as having been a mentor and coach in the educational setting. Now, as a modern elder, she is a mentor who offers transformative practices for deep self-exploration, healing, and for moving her clients to find their inner strength to thrive, living compassionately, and allowing the beauty of their loving essence to emerge. Originally from Bogota, Colombia, she came to the U.S. to study and became a learning scientist, educator, and researcher. She's been married for 43 years, has 2 grown daughters, and 4 grandchildren. Ursula's new book is titled Wisdom in Being, Thriving After Loss Through Belonging, Awe, and Loving Presence, and has made her a #1 international best-selling author. Welcome, Ursula. Welcome.
Thank you, and a pleasure to be here.
Good. I have to ask you, what was the inspiration for your book?
Well, let's look at the context surrounding those writing pieces. It was in 2021 when there were some rather difficult times in my life, my dad's final days. And after a full, vibrant life, he was declining. And on my birthday, we had the diagnosis of his terminal cancer. And about a month later, he went to his final resting place. A week or so before, he started transitioning, and I had had very deep connections with him before and heart-to-heart talks about dying. And I believed, he was going to be okay. And I wanted him to know that we were going to be okay as well. And so we had that conversation. I told him that it was okay for him to go. And he said, such a wonderful gift that you just given me. But it was not until his final day, indeed, after finishing his breakfast, and he put his hand on my cheek and he said, you have such a beautiful, loving presence. I felt so moved. And I thought he was talking about my always being attentive to everyone's needs and caring for our family. But it was not until a year later when I realized that he wanted me to include myself in that circle of love. So his last words embarked me on a year-long journey of self-discovery. And that's what the book was about, helping me realize the universal struggle we all face in these situations. And I wanted to offer a practical guidance, not just for healing, but for growing and thriving before beyond hardship and loss.
Right. So in the book is all of the, I mean, I've read most of your book, but I want to try to paraphrase it for our listeners. The book kind of like encapsulate the kinds of things that you incorporated into your um, process for healing and going through the grief, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So there's so many things in the book that
Multiple
oh
practices
yeah,
indeed.
there are just so many things, and I want to ask you about a couple of them in a little bit. But I mean, just how did you gain all this insight to navigate this loss?
Well, the book became a vehicle to express in allegory and poetry, which I love to write, and my own illustrations, this journey of awakening and how to deal with loss. And so I had lost him, my lifelong cheerleader. I needed to find other ways to reconcile that void I felt within. The many changes taking place that summer began with that journey. And of course, it was not just about surviving, but thriving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a surrendering for reconciliation within myself. And that deep surrender was to guide me to my fullest, most alive expression of myself. The realization that there was an intuitive guidance, my soul's voice, which was calling to harmonize my being. Through quieting and going within with mindful meditation, I learned to listen to my soul's voice,
That's
to that
beautiful.
intuitive voice.
That's
It led me
beautiful
to a
because there's so many
space.
people that don't get really to that point where they can actually listen to the
It,
soul's voice.
it is a daily practice indeed.
Were
And
you
that led
actually
me to a
practicing?
space.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
no worries. It led me to a space that really grounded me in spaciousness and freedom instead of contraction. Mhm.
Mm-mm. Well, you were kind of already practicing these things, or you kind of discovered them along the way.
Well, some of them I had been practicing for a long time, and more in terms of the meditation that comes from nature as
Mm-hmm.
our teacher.
Take
And
walks in the forest. Yeah.
in yes, being in a forest, being in a garden, just having that quieting time that brings such peacefulness within. But I had an aunt of my mother's that was a Swami, and she had, in my early teen years, taught my mom some meditations and a little bit about Buddhism and so forth. And I had never really studied it. I was just curious, as an adolescent. But it was not until now that eventually I started to really learn the mindful meditation and compassionate meditations. And so I did embark on a journey of learning and applying and going with what I knew and bridging to this new content and new practices that I was learning.
You're explaining kind of like your discovery process, but I wanted to know if you had, like in your in the whenever I'm like in the phase of wanting to discover something, I find that serendipitously the universe brings me people to learn from. Did you find new teachers? Did you find new
Yeah.
inspirational kinds of things in this process?
Oh, yes. Well, I became the researcher of my own experience.
Oh,
And
okay.
through going through the experience itself, as well as looking at who out there was offering insights and wisdom, I
Mm-hmm.
found wonderful insight in what Christine Neff has taught in self-compassion, as well as Tara Brock with
Mm-hmm.
mindful meditation, and Jack Cornfield, and of course, some of the books from Sharon Salzberg. So I was reading and connecting. I also did do some counseling, of course, after my dad's death, and found wonderful mentors in all of them, in the books and in the kind language and kind wording and kind hearts that they express all of their being.
Yeah. And did you find also that there are people that just show up in your life when you need them? That you just
Indeed, indeed.
it really is
That
fun.
one of them was Justin Michael Williams. My husband and I decided to go on a trip to the coast and decided to take some days off, and we met this young man who's actually an author himself and a meditator, and he offered a class for 40 days of transformation, which was a wonderful class to be able to understand all about our fears and shadows of our lives and be able to navigate those, as well as to find more calm and peace in any situation. I love his book called Stay Woke, because you can literally just kind of like, but you do recipes, you look for that recipe, you look for that meditation. So
Yeah.
that was a powerful, right around the corner from after my dad's death, that
Mm.
I used his
That
insight
was the
and
first
knowledge.
kind of person that kind of was put in your path for you to
Correct.
discover. Mm.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing how things like that happen?
Indeed, indeed. Yes, inner freedom came about when that mind-body dilemma quieted and I was able to surrender and to let go, letting go of all the things that were causing suffering and by paying attention to them. Even though
Mm-hmm.
it sounds strange, but that's the work. I learned about Byron Katie and how she teaches
Yes,
us
it's the
precisely to
work.
make that U-turn and go back inside and look at how it is that our emotions or what we're projecting or seeing in others is, if we identify it in them, then it's part of us too. So doing that work as well. I paid attention to that and I embraced it with compassion, which was the big key to be able to deal with the pieces that were inside that were suffering and
Oh,
sorrowful.
yes, absolutely. And the whole aspect of self-compassion, I mean, it's sometimes it's just so untenable for folks because they have had this programmed unworthiness that prevents them from getting to that place of self-compassion. So that fact that you were able to do that by yourself is huge.
Well, I think, like I said, with nature, really being a teacher, it was reinforced by that deep understanding that we're in an ever evolving and dynamic world.
Yeah.
And therefore, we really don't have all that control. So it was both teaching me how to surrender and how to pick up onto those nuances and the clarity that comes from the wisdom of inter and intraconnectedness in
Mm.
all that is. Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Siegel's book on intraconnectedness goes deeply into this. Um, in the middle of it all, I put myself within that frame of mind and heart.
Mm-hmm.
So once I saw that nature, what nature had for me, and opened myself to it, not trying to be in control, but letting the ego have its
Mm.
way,
Mm.
but rather appeasing it, acknowledging its true evolutionary role. Because we are built, our structure is built, our brain is built to survive. And as such, and they call it the reptilian brain because up to reptiles, that was the development that we had.
Right.
Then we tend to react and be, scared about something that's
Right. Yeah. The amygdala is
well,
that organ that senses fear and it doesn't understand if it's a saber-toothed tiger or if it's just stress,
and
if it
then
feels the
actually
same.
the farther frontal regions of the brain that the mammalian groups
Yeah,
developed
the
and of course
mammalian brain.
reasoning
Yeah.
for
Mm.
Homo sapiens sapiens,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
humanity, has are the parts that, as a scientist, as a biologist, I understand, and therefore visualizing those connections and how can I make then this connection between my frontal brain and my reptilian brain be stronger so that it's like holding the hand of the child that is wanting to run out
Right.
into the street, instead keeping it safe but also allowing for some risk taking that is healthy, right?
Yeah.
So it's the piece about boundaries. And in the piece of shadow work, that's what I found is that I had grown up really not knowing what healthy boundaries were. And therefore, I almost identified like with a ball of yarn that is, fraying. And I actually had the visual. and and so in thinking about boundaries, I actually came across that toy that expands with, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it's like
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
a little
Uh-huh.
toy that you can close up and then
I thought you were
eventually
going to
you
show me
can
a slinky.
it's like a slim, yeah, no, it's not a slinky. It's like a geodome, but it
Yeah.
closes
Yeah.
down. And in thinking about all the things that hurt us or the things that were part of my life that might have hurt me, that's what this little ball of yarn inside is. And so if my heart is contracted, and closing this, that's all the space it allows. And there's nothing
Yay.
else in there. And therefore, when you actually open yourself up and allow space for seeing across what might be out there that is part of our evolutionary care and wisdom, also
What?
just allowing in what is good, but knowing that this is inside, that what is already part of me exists and needs to be cared for, but it doesn't need to take up all this space. And
That's
therefore,
a
I can,
wonderful visual,
it
Ursula.
is,
That's
it is.
wonderful.
And I can embrace it with compassion. And
Yeah.
we might have other things, like sparkly, bubbly personality. And so
Mhm.
something that we can also have as part of us. And therefore, they can be inside there as well.
Mhm.
And they might take a little bit of room, but they're the happy parts of us. Or maybe the parts that are also for when we are in true danger that we need to take care of. Or that little
Right.
girl for women or the little boy that we need to
Yeah.
take care of. So
Yes.
all those parts are part of us. And when I realized that I'm the full package and I don't need to try to chop away all the things that were suffering or painful or hurtful, I just need to tend to them.
Mhm.
It's just like cutting the branches of a tree. If you try to cut the branches, it's going to bloom some more. It's going to keep on growing. So instead of going against nature, going with nature.
Gotcha. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk. Ursula, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the shadow work that you've done and the tree explanation that you've got in your book. It's such, you've referred to it already, and it's just such a wonderful kind of metaphor for what you were talking about, the total package. Yeah. So, Ursula, well, before we take a break, why don't you tell people how they can find you?
Okay, my website is ursulasexton.com
Uh,
and it's simple. I am
yes,
also in
just her
LinkedIn,
name.
just my
Just her name.
name, correct. I'm also in LinkedIn and in Instagram.
Mhm.
So basically those are the main sources.
And it's URUS.
Ursula
Ursula
Sexton,
Sexton.
Sexton.
That's right. That's what I was trying to get you to do.
No problem.
All right. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about shadow work and this metaphor of using the tree to feel like you're a complete being. We'll be
Wonderful.
right back. Hi there, welcome back to the Crystal Coach Show. And I have as my guest today Ursula Sexton, new author of the book Wisdom in Being, Thriving After Loss Through Belonging, Awe, and Loving Presence. We're so glad to have you here today with us, Ursula. And as we had said before break, we really want to dive into this, a specific kind of way, an approach that you used to really kind of help you get out of that mindset of unworthiness, or I have to take care of everybody else before I take care of myself. So that self-compassion and how that kind of you help to integrate your whole entire being with this exercise that you call the tree, which is literal because you use the illustration of a tree, right? And then
Right.
also the shadow work, in which you define all the types of fear. Can you just kind of delve into that and just, I'm going to sit back and listen because I think it's fascinating.
Certainly. Okay. Grieving brought past memories, insights, and curiosity within my being. That was just a fact.
Mm.
Dealing with shadows and fears and grief became the greatest lessons to overcome a deep sense of isolation, filled with anxiety and expectations. Overcoming grief and finding abundance was a gradual process. It really was marked by moments of clarity and inner peace and a sense of purpose. One looks for signs of inner strength and gratitude to find in that present moment and to find that joy amidst challenges were key pieces to be able to know that I was on the path to recovery or wholesomeness. Mapping backwards was another key piece. It's an educational strategy that is used to know the destination and then work backwards to see the steps needed to get there.
So you're saying working backwards. I missed that first part. So
mapping backwards.
mopping backwards.
Kind of
Okay, like you're
creating a
mopping the
map.
floor.
No, like a map, making a map.
Mapping. I
No
forgive me.
worries.
It,
So
my
it's
headset's not
mapping
quite.
backwards.
It's getting a little fuzzy.
No worries. Yeah, it'd be kind of fun to mop also,
I know,
getting
it
the
was
dirt
like,
out of the
how
way
do
to
you do
clear,
that?
to allow things to grow. Anyways, so I applied this technique of mapping backwards by looking at the sense of living my life within a connected sense of wholeness and completion, and to see how important that is to remember this state and to continue to nurture it.
Hmm,
I pulled from my biological background and the love of nature and the fact that my life, in all my life, I have seen a deep connection to trees,
hmm,
a major theme in the book, as you
hmm,
mentioned. Trees are life-giving, they're strong and flexible. They withstand storms, if they topple, their material is used for anything from a booster chair for a baby all the way to our last resting place and all the utilities in between. So I saw my connection to the whole via the trees. A tree provides the oxygen that gives us life, and in turn, we reciprocate with our carbon dioxide.
hmm.
This cycle of reciprocity is happening in an enclosed world system that has continued to do so since the first green plants provided oxygen to ancient living organisms that required it. It's the same oxygen that helped dinosaurs be alive, fish in the oceans, and all sorts of oxygen dependent creatures that have roamed our planet. So, that in and of itself is just mind boggling. So, I had taken a course through the Modern Elder Academy. Chip Conley is the CEO and founder, on purposefulness, just as I had finished retiring being an educator. And it guided us to create our own tree, where the roots were our foundational qualities, the trunk were the skills or life launching paths and
Hmm.
habits that would help us to show up in the world in the way that would be in harmony with ourselves and with our surroundings. And of course, the branches would become dreams and achievements, trials and errors, and of course, the fruit that we bear. But one tree alone never really exists. Forests are interconnected, seeds are dispersed by flying creatures and others that live and climb upon them. There's a whole network. There's research about trees, even in like Puerto Rico, the beautiful trees there. The roots are totally intertwined because when there's hurricanes, they will not topple. They're supporting each other. So the trees themselves are connected to all the other spheres of our planet. The
And there's
geosphere,
that mycelium network
the
also that
mycelium
goes
network,
through trees.
the most giant living organism in the world, exactly. So the different spheres of our planet, the geosphere all the way in the ground below us, all the way to the center of the earth,
Hmm.
with its roots, the trees, of course, into the surface that it is allowed to go as deep as it can, absorbing nutrients and minerals. And the water that becomes the vehicle for transport is part of the hydrosphere, but also in the clouds.
Hmm.
Then the trees themselves being part of the biosphere, a living diversity within themselves. And the atmosphere with the gas exchange that fills our lungs and allows us to live. So for me, the curiosity of how all of this happened and where the capillarity of the trees brings moisture all the way to the most top part of a tree, and evaporation causes it to create a form of a vacuum, and in doing so it causes a pumping action against gravity. It's just astonishing. As a freshman, I remember sitting in my college classroom on the third floor of our campus science building, looking at the top of the trees as our physiology teacher was explaining the mechanisms and the intricate structure of trees. And I had always wondered, how do they get to grow so tall? How does all, get up there? The exercise I did and we did with the workshop that I attended ended up on the tree itself. But for me, this ever expanding interconnectedness and understanding drove me to include these interactions in the book and to see the drifting clouds that are part of the scenery as teachers. Also, the transient shadows that we feel
I thought that was
things.
fascinating because that part about the clouds being our fears or our the other kind of, as you say, teachers. I've never looked at the clouds like that. You know,
Indeed.
that
I mean,
sounds like a
we
song,
use our
but
imagination when we see clouds, and it's lovely because that's the other part of us. But
right.
indeed, I have a meditation in which it talks about think if you have a thought, allow it to move by as a transient cloud. And in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, the transient clouds also became the fears, the fear of success, the fear of failure, the fear of whatever is, causing us to constrict. And so that's why I represented them as thus. And yet, looking at the transformation of those clouds through the sunlight and having the sun become the source of energy, power, transformative, God, whatever people want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
spirit, causes them to become the droplets of water that we'll call rain. And in a way, is super special because Tara Brach talks about rain. Her an acronym is part of the meditation piece, but not as the rain that I have. But I decided to link them in the book.
Yes, I read that.
And the droplets themselves are transformed from being the cloudy, foggy, transient pieces of suffering and life that we have
Mm-hmm.
into crystalline droplets of water that are transformed and are lessons that once we have been able to transform with in our with our light, with God, with prayer, with meditation, with the sense of self being expanded, then we can have those nutrients, those droplets of lessons land back into the soil, back into our grounding, and allow us to continue to nurture our tree, continue to nurture our lives. So that's how I thought a
That
full
is
cycle of connectivity that makes us be very present like a tree. And that's why I adore them.
right. Oh, that's awesome. And what's really cool about your book, Ursula, is that there's an example of what a complete tree, looks like. So, you have in your book, you have a blank page with an outline of a tree that you can copy and make that your own and do the exercise for yourself. And then an illustration of what, for an example, your tree looks like, and what things are on the roots and what's up the going up the trunk, and what are in the branches, and what are out
Yes,
there in the clouds and the raindrops. It's I love that illustration, and I love that as a tool to really kind of hone in on self and what what's in my field, what's going on with me, what do I bring, what are my challenges, what are my transformational opportunities. It's just
exactly.
a wonderful, wonderful
Thank you.
tool.
Yeah.
Can you show? I think you brought that illustration of the tree. I know that our listeners can't see this, but maybe you can come back and look at this video replay on YouTube, and you'll be able to see what she's holding up. But it's a really amazing, because it, like the outline that's in the book is simply just a blank page with a black, with black outline of a tree. And what Ursula did was just fill it in and make it a complete picture, and it just colored it, and everything is beautiful. You got that? There it is. Yeah. It's just, see, that's the blank one, and then that's the one that's been one on one side is blank and the other one has been filled in, even with the rainbows. So
Exactly. So then
yeah.
the part that continues on this is that as the droplets fall and light infuses through the lessons that we're learning, not
Mm-hmm.
only is it nurturing when they fall to the ground, but in the process, sometimes the droplets are collectively just at the right angle, just with the right amount of energy to form these beautiful rainbows. And in my mind's eye and my heart, I felt those would be a representation of our open hearts, everybody's light shining. And rainbows are always inspiring. I don't know about you, but when
Oh
I
yes,
see a
definitely.
rainbow, it reminds me even of the first time. It's almost like the same sensation that we felt the first time gets felt the next time and every time we see a rainbow.
It engenders joy in me. It's
Exactly.
like, that intake of breath where you feel that joy, you just go, and as long as it's there, I'm just in this state of joy.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
wonderful.
And
Yeah.
even the rainbows themselves represent that transiency sometimes of what we call glimpses of that joyful state in which we can find ourselves,
Hmm.
and then they will dissipate, but then we can try to maintain that light within anyway, even if we're
Right.
not shining it, but we're, feeling it inside.
Right. Well, you can remember that that's kind of an access point for you. Remember
Exactly.
the rainbow and maybe hold on
Yeah.
to that feeling
Indeed,
just a
going
little
back to
longer.
that importance of the remembering this state of connectedness, just as the
Mm.
tree exercise shows, it became a beacon to show how the loving presence had to become part of my daily practice. Self care, building routines that fostered and allowed
Mm.
sensations of joy and peace to emerge. And along the journey, I pulled on the memories that reinforced that sense of joy and belonging, and that was awe. This made it possible to make the fundamental connection and interconnectedness between all that is and myself, the feeling
Wow.
of awe, because
The
I think
feeling.
that's what we feel also when we see a rainbow.
Yes, absolutely. Before we can get to awe, though, we have
Hmm.
to really look at the clouds
Yes, the
and
clouds.
see how we can get. We have to address the clouds, and so there's a whole chapter you've got on shadow work, i.e., the clouds, the fears. And I was fascinated by all of the different ways that you found to define fears. Can you review that for our listeners for me?
Yes, indeed, that was also part of the learning that I had from Justin Michael Williams, and it was just such an eye opener. And tapping onto that inner knowing and looking for how to find those within myself, indeed, looking at fear in of itself is real. It's an emotion. The other one is echo fear. And it comes as a disguise because past fears that no longer exist are echoing in our soul, in our hearts. And they tend to sneak in there and make us fearful of something that is no longer relevant. It's no longer part of our lives. Why do we keep bringing it up? Perfectionism, indeed. Once an idea is exhausted and to the point that it's no longer enjoyable, it becomes a type of fear.
Yeah, procrastination is the expression of fear of perfectionism, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Done is better than perfect, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody's perfect.
Well, growing up in an alcoholic home, as the eldest. I was that was perfectionism was my thing,
Yes,
to hang on to.
indeed. A lot of us, I mean, for different reasons and different situations and conditionings, had to pull on perfectionism as a way of maybe feeling loved and acceptance, belonging. Indeed, it's a
Mm,
very powerful fear.
yeah,
The
it
inner
is.
critic that we hear so much about, of course, our critical voice. And again, going back to that reptilian brain of ours that wants us to survive and not want us to take risks and saying, no, 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 maybe you shouldn't go there. In some cases, it works, but not take on the stage of your life and make you not be able to really live a fulfilling life,
Uh,
right?
It's so mean, that inner critic. It's like the ego. It's always scared anyway because it dies with the body. But
Yes.
it's like that. Who the hell do you think you are? You'll never be able to do that. Just all the time.
And it
And
can come in different voices. There are many
well,
types of
that's true.
inner critics inside of us. And so that's something that we can discover and try to have tea with them, is what
Yeah.
I've learned.
Yes, that Sufi saying, invite your fears to tea. Yeah.
Exactly. The other fear is the fear of distraction. It's a very stealthy one. How many
Yeah.
times, you say something like, "Oh, I've got to do this before I can do that," and you're delaying and distracting and not really addressing the need and the fear that is inside that causes
My
you
mama, my grandmother used to always say it was a but first.
to.
She said, well, I got to do such and such, but first I got to do. Well, I got one of those deckum but first coming up on me. That's what it called, a but first. But
Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I when I read that, it just really went ping for me because that's exactly what I do.
it resonates.
Borderline
Yeah.
ADHD. Oh, look, a bird. So I just get really distracted, and knowing that that's a type of fear process, really, wow, that was for me was just like that's so powerful that
Mm.
you can name it, and then once you name it you can claim it, and then invite it to tea, right, so
Yeah.
that the cloud can dissipate
And
that.
that's the next type of fear, indecisiveness,
Mm-hmm.
because you can go ahead to do something, you cannot go ahead, but choosing not to is indecisiveness, and that causes a tremendous amount of fear.
Mm.
And therefore, we have to either choose, not choose, or choose to not decide at the moment, but make a choice, right? And not allow
Well,
the fear
how
to
does that
trigger.
compare with paralyzed will, though?
To choose to not decide?
No, when you have when you're like you can't even move really. That if there's a decision to be made that you know
Yes.
what to do but you cannot do it.
Indeed,
Um,
the level of stress or the level of anxiety or the level of that fear
hmm,
can be paralyzing. And that's where, if it is something that is requiring assistance from professionals, when it's continuous, chronic, and so forth, definitely it's something that we need to pursue. If it's something that through meditation you can calm it. You can really calm it and do some breath work too.
hmm,
Breath
hmm,
work is amazing to be able to
yeah,
do that. Or if what calls you to just kind of snap out of it is dance or put, music, whatever it is that can distract a little bit that mode of that indecisiveness and fear of moving, breath you have is natural. Music, you may need to go to research, and having assistance also takes a little more effort. So breathing is the most natural form that I see as a wonderful way to tap
to
into
address
that
that.
and try to
Yeah.
calm it down, even
Hmm.
if you're like completely frozen. Of course, if you're frozen because there's a certain danger that is valid, of course you need to take action, right?
Right. But well, I want to keep going with this, but we
Yes.
need to take yet another break, and it's just a real short one. But when we come back, I want Ursula to share with us one of her poems that's in the book. There's so many wonderful illustrations and quotes and poems that Ursula's put into and woven into her book. That if you would like to share a poem from your book, that would be awesome. When we come right back, you'll hear from Ursula again. Thanks.
Thank you, Anahata.
Hi there. Welcome back again to the Crystal Coach Show. I'm your host, Anahata, and my guest today is Ursula Sexton, the author of Wisdom in Being, Thriving After Loss Through Belonging, Awe, and Loving Presence. We have been talking about the shadow work and the definition of fear. Before we went to break, I thought we were done with the fear, but we got two more to go. So, Ursula, you want to just round out the rest of the fears that we have that are there for us to contemplate and to envision the cloud dissolving.
Excellent. Yes. Well, avoidance is another of our fears. It really
Avoidance.
convinces us that it is something that's not important, that you need to postpone it, that you're too busy, that you don't have the energy. So it's something that also kind of stealthily filters into our lives. And so avoidance
Okay.
is another one of those fears.
Yeah,
And
I
so
have to
how fear
chuckle
shows up.
because we took a break right before you talked about avoidance.
No problem, no problem. And of course, conspiracy,
Yeah.
stories, we make up things with limited data points. We
Mm.
only have a certain level of understanding, and until we can get a little bit more to be able to clarify, then we tend to stand into those kinds of fears in our hearts. And
Mm.
so we build judgments and the what ifs and the maybe if I did and so forth. So those are the last two fears that I was wanting to share with you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I just found as I was reading it, it just the whole part, the front part is about environmental loss, right? And the connection, the reconnection that you had about, um, you know, what's going on with Mother Nature and what the connection we have, and the fact that we can see the whole picture as we're all part of this whole ecosystem of Earth. But then as we get into the specifics and the kinds of things that you did during your process, like the tree, like the naming of the fears and addressing them, that was just so powerful. I highly encourage listeners to check out Ursula's book, The Wisdom in Being. It's not it's just Wisdom in Being, thriving after loss through belonging, awe, and loving presence. It's just really, there's so much there. It's like drinking from a fire hose, really. You know, I thought I could work my way through it over the weekend. I'm still reading it. I'm about halfway through. I just got kind of stuck on the tree and the shadow work, you know, because I was thinking about how I would apply that in my life. And so, but everything that I've written, I mean, that you've written so far that I've read is just really, really super powerful. Is there one of those poems in your book that you think would be really good to share for the listeners here at the Crystal Coach Show?
Certainly, I have one. And in a way, it's a kind of a summation of the process. It just kind of
That's great. That's a good one.
channeled through me, and it's called Searching and Finding. While searching and finding my inner being, I saw tenuous shadows that live within. Sitting within with them to find their meaning, arose curiosity to go further in. While searching and finding my inner voice, I saw a struggling seed wanting to grow. Mindfully and tenderly, I weeded around it, giving it a space so its beauty would show. While searching and finding my inner peace, self-compassion slowed down the pace, by gently speaking as a friend with ease, allowing, releasing, and grounding in place. While searching and finding my own resilience, I lovingly leaned on silence and intuition, meditating and reflecting on my experience. Stillness brought strength to fruition. While searching and finding belonging, outward searching brought pain and fears. Working deep inside on longing, on bonding, allowed for healing and joyful tears. While searching and finding self-respect, boundaries made themselves known, with wisdom on what to and what not to expect, and a guarding shield for expansion of what must be shown. While searching and finding my confidence grow, struggling pointers signaled direction, allowing for love to simply flow, mindfully listening with guiding intention. While searching and finding my own truth, spirit touched my heart and soul, opening up surrender so smooth, blossoming wonder and feeling whole. While searching and finding my inner loving, I saw the bright colors that shine in my heart, breathing in rhythm with its calling, bringing calm to my being and its every part.
Love that. Is that at the end? I haven't found it yet.
It's towards the end, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a wonderful way to end our conversation today, Ursula. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us your wisdom and your experiences and inspiring us to take control of our own self-awareness and compassion, having compassion for ourselves and how we can do that. But if people resonate with you and want to work with you, they can find you at ursulasexton.com, right?
Correct.
Is there any other place you want to direct them to?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn and on Instagram as well. I do have Facebook, but it's not quite fully developed for this.
And is it author?
Author Ursula Sexton.
Author Ursula Sexton. That's Instagram, right? And is Facebook? It's also author.
I think the Instagram is Ursula Sexton author, and the Facebook is author Ursula Sexton.
Okay. well, if you Google that, you'll find her.
You'll find her. Me. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thanks again so much for taking
you.
time with us, and good luck on your new adventure that you're going into and the practice that you're developing, and many, many blessings. Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you, Anahata.
Okay. See you next time.
You have been listening to The Crystal Coach Show, helping you live every day with clarity, guidance, and practical wisdom. With me, your host, Anahata. Tune in every first and third Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time on TransformationTalkRadio.com, where we channel divine wisdom through stories of service, spirituality, and stones for self-care. Feel connected and reside in the vibration of love on The Crystal Coach Show. For more information and to become the best version of yourself, visit thecrystalcoach.com. That's thecrystalcoach.com.